Welcome back to the shop. Had a week off in there. We're waiting on supplies. Didn't want to bite off anything else. Wanted to keep the chassis a roller. So took the week off. First real week off since the start of the project. Not a bad thing. You got to have a little downtime in there once in a while. But as you can see, shop's all the metalwork's cleared out, and we're in a paint booth mode, myself included. Shooting the epoxy primer today. We'll probably follow this video all the way through. Not sure exactly how this will play out. Haven't really filmed much in the paint space. It's a little bit harder. You got the mask on. You can't really talk. But we'll see what we get. It'll be fun to shoot what we can. But otherwise, starting with the epoxy primer, that stuff's pretty gnarly. So hence I got the bunny suit on. When you get that overspray on your arms and stuff, you'll be sticky for a while, so you do want to cover up. But otherwise, ran all the panels back through the blaster. They were sitting for a while because we were waiting on paint, and we had basically a week of a monsoon in there. So ran them all through the blaster. They're all fresh, clean metal. Gave them a quick wipe with the panel cleaner. So we should be prepped, pretty good to go. Gonna mix up some paint, get going. Otherwise, gonna shoot the rig in pieces. Started with the doors, front and rear, windshield, and then I got basically the rear hardtop spar just because I had it there. Second batch, I think I'll probably shoot hood, hardtop sides, that kind of stuff, and then I'll probably shoot the front clip, and then the tub. When you're kind of working in the garage, it's better to shoot small batches. You know, you don't have a full paint booth. It's a little harder to do kind of production lines type stuff. So working with what we got, I think we'll turn out pretty good though. We'll see how we go. But otherwise, enough yakking, let's get going. I'm gonna go mix up some paint and we will start shooting, see what we get. I just got a makeshift workbench here just to give you a place to mix. Kind of gives you a clean workbench versus using anything in the shop. The shop usually has some pretty funky stuff. This epoxy primer happens to be a 2-to-1, so just going to use the mixing cup. Oddly enough, they don't do 2-to-1 on the mixing cup, but last I checked, if you do the math, 4-to-2 is 2-to-1. They do have a 4-to-2-to-1 chunk, so you can just use the 2-to-1, do the 4-to-2, skip the last one. So we'll do all right. It actually is a 4-to-2-to-1 if you mix in acetone. They have an option there. So they have a 2-to-1-to-half on the material sheet. That's a 4-to-2-to-1. So we'll use that. We'll mix up a decent batch. It's got a pot life of about 8 hours, it says, so plenty of time. It's not going to set up on me. We'll see what we need to shoot. We'll start with a full batch and get her mixed up. It says you got to mix it for about 5 minutes because it is the epoxy. So we will do so. So I got her filled up to the 6 mark. Holy Moses! Give this a shake. Get that back on there. So we got it up to the 6 mark on our 4-to-2-to-1, so we got to go up to the 6 mark in the next. Oink. I'll set a timer. Says we need to mix this guy around for 5 minutes of mechanical agitation to get that epoxy to kind of do its thing. Epoxy is kind of a weird little beast that way. So I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes and stir this. Got a timer set on the phone. We'll let her eat and be back in a bit. Basically, I got, since I got all clean metal, you know, you're starting from scratch. In the old days, they used to use like an acid etch primer as the first coat. They've kind of shifted a little bit recently being relative, to epoxy primer for that first layer over the metal. It really kind of locks things in, a little more durable. So you will still see etch primer in places, but a lot of people have switched to using this epoxy primer first, then they'll do the filler, surfacer, base clear. Just a little more durable material, a little more modern. So we'll give her a go. Can't say I've used a lot. I used it on the frame. underneath on the chassis. It was the first coat, so that'll be nice. It'll be a pretty resilient first coat on that undercarriage, and should be the same on the body. It'll be just kind of nice, lock everything in. I did pick up some seam sealer, and I'll be going through as much as I can. If you watch Bad Obsession Motorsports, when they did their Mini, they kind of did the same thing. They kind of really did the full tilt with the seam sealer just to really button things up. So once this is on there, we'll be able to kind of run through that. The doors aren't too bad. A lot of that's on the tub. There's a lot of pinch seams, although there's a few where the doors come together in clamshell. So we'll give her some seam sealer once this is all dry. Kind of part of the process, but we'll see how she goes. Most of the paint work I've done prior has been over existing paint versus having full-blown sandblasted clean metal. Usually it's kind of a patch panel here and there, and most of it's existing panels that have existing paint. Well, somewhere in there the battery cut out, but we got primer on everything. One little drip there, but that'll sand out. It's all right. It's primer. Getting used to shooting paint again. So one nice thing about painting, you start with the primer and you kind of get your sea legs back. You can see the couple dimples there that we knew we needed body work. That was where I took the oil canning out of the door. Otherwise, theirs are looking pretty good. All kind of buttoned up. Kind of a preview of the color. It is going to be white. It's going to be a little bit more of a cream color. But it is kind of nice to see it looking more and more like what it's supposed to. But otherwise, primer's on, gun's clean. I'm going to clean myself up. Let the fans run and clear the place out a little bit longer. And then tomorrow, probably, we got to let this dry overnight. But tomorrow, we'll be able to put some body filler on. Not a ton of work on these. I got to do those two dimples. Got to do a little bit on the bottom of those two doors, and a little bit across the front of the windshield. Shouldn't have to do anything on this guy, other than get rid of that drip, and just a little bit on this guy where there's some pitting. So not a ton of body work. After that, we'll shoot some surfacer and then via some block sanding, and then we'll throw some paint and clear on it. But these got to dry overnight, so we're going to let them cook, and we'll see you tomorrow. Well, new day, sun's out. Everything had a nice chance to cure overnight, so it's nice and dry. Technically, if you do one coat, you can get away with a 60-minute before moving on to the next, but just was a good time of day to get some dinner and let it cure overnight, especially for epoxy. It's a slow roller. Just plucked the passenger door off to start. Luck of the draw. There are a couple dimples here where we had to heat it and give it a whack with the hammer to get rid of some of that oil canning, so we just got to fill in those. There is a little bit of a pockmark. I don't think there's much I can do with it, where the press didn't quite land right when they did this door pocket. We're just going to probably let that ride. I don't think you can get that crease to look nice and tight. Kind of one of those little quirks. Couple little divots here and there from doing the door pressing. This is the one that was bananaed, so a little spot weld stuff to touch up. There is a little dimple here and there down by the hinges that might need a little bit just to help level that out. And likewise, I'm not sure if you can see it as you kind of bring it up and down. There is just a little bit of a riffle up here on this upper rail from when they pressed it and formed it. So I think we'll give that a real light skim of just that glazing compound to smooth that out. But all in all, the door itself, not too bad. I mean, it is a new door, but it is, you know, kind of the South American pressing where it's not perfect. But otherwise, typically the FJs, you can see the spot welds, so not too worried about those. But it will be nice to level out some of those kind of goofy spots. I think there is a little bit as well, kind of on these upper door sills, basically where the window is, that could use a little bit of that real light glazing just to take some of the riffle out from when they machined it, just to tidy it up a little bit. The OEM doors are pressed a little bit nicer, so they wouldn't have quite as much funk. So we're going to mix up some putty and work that, then we'll be block sanding it, and then it's just going to be more of the same. We'll work through, see what each one has. Each piece is going to have a little bit of difference. I don't think there's a whole lot to do for that door. Windshield needs a little touch up from the patching, same way with those rear doors. But anywho, time to mix up some mud, get that curing, and we'll start chipping away. Well, surfacer had a chance to dry, laid down pretty nice. It's always funny, it kind of reminds me of like a real thin layer of spray on body filler. You know, it's kind of a thick build, but it's made to be sanded off so you can get a real nice level surface. As you can see, kind of in the shine, the shine left on the primer, we did get it to lay down nice. That's where those two dimples were to get the oil canning out. So the South American door did kind of lay out fairly decently. Same way up here, you can kind of look down the window rail. There were some of those dye marks. Those came out pretty good. Same way with up top. Just a real light bit of that glazing compound. You know, it lays down real nice, and you can sand those marks out. I did leave most of the spot weld type holes, kind of typical FJ40. Those are typically visible in most places. Some of the worst ones I did fill in. Some of the more correct looking ones I did leave. But all in all, that looks pretty happy with that. Both doors turned out pretty good. Same way with these rears. Bodywork turned out pretty good. Can't get quite the, yeah, maybe we can. Let's see. If we slide this feller back. Oh, come on, friend. Hang on up. Yeah, there we got a little better light. So same way, this is where it was all patched up, you know, kind of south of the border here. Laid down pretty good, a little bit of filler, and then, you know, when you put this surfacer on top, it takes out any of those last little bits. We do need to do a wet sand to flatten it right out, but otherwise laid down really nice. It's kind of funny in the fisheye of the lens, it looks like this is curved, but it is square. So pretty happy there. Same way with the windshield. Windshield came out nice. Surfacer really does help kind of give you a real good surface, hence the point. So one more step down, a few more to go. day on the paint work. Kind of figuring out what we want to show as we go. Gonna keep ripping through. We've got base and clear, so these panels are out in the garage. So we're gonna get them on the rack, get them block sanded, do a little wet sand, get that surface there nice and smooth. Hood, hard top, bib, yada yada yada. Get those all block sanded, get them dry, cleaned up. We'll bring them back in the shop, hang them up, shoot some base clear on them, and get them all the way through to curing. And then we'll do the same for the doors. I think what we're going to do is wrap all this up all the way through clear coat, at least for all the pieces that come off. There are a few left on the rig, as I mentioned earlier. We've got the fenders and the running boards that weren't bare steel, so they've got a little different process. But I'm trying to get all these buttoned up, make room in the shop. But otherwise, they turned out nice, looking pretty good. Pretty happy with how the bodywork came out. It'll be nice to see how they look with a little bit of wet sand on. Should get them nice and smooth. Should get rid of any last riffles. I'm gonna set up the boxes, probably do it outside just to keep some of the mess out of the shop. Start to get the shop nice and clean for that clear coat, base coat, and see what we can get today. It's a little chilly this morning, should warm up in the afternoon, should be enough to paint, but take her day by day. Onward. So you can see we got our block sand. This is a nice big flat panel. It's kind of interesting. You kind of get a little bit of a scorecard of how you did on your bodywork. So you can see here that's the epoxy primer underneath my surfacer. So kind of came through a little bit there. This has had a while to dry, so I'm not too worried about that. Sometimes you can get a little bit of a lift if your surfacer isn't cured real good. I think we'll be okay there, but it kind of shows you just there's a couple little high spots. Otherwise we did get it pretty level. Which I'm pretty happy with. These aren't probably the most level panels to begin with. Obviously that's not even an area that really had anything. But this is the side that got a milk truck tanker pushed into the side. We did straighten this rail out. The old bodywork it had a dimple here. So probably when that got pushed in and pulled back out, probably gave us a little bit of a high spot there. But again, not through to the metal, it's just down to the epoxy. This has had a good time to cure. I think we'll be okay. But it is kind of just interesting. As you do the bodywork, you definitely kind of have a natural self-teacher where as you learn stuff like that, worst case you got to go back and do a little bit of a respray. It's not the end of the world. So anybody who hasn't done bodywork, just kind of go in and have at it. The worst you're going to do is waste a little material. You can always just give it another sand and coat. It's a waste of time and a waste of material, but it's a way to learn. But otherwise, anyway, going to flip this guy over, get the other side done, and keep chipping away on these panels. So I got the base clear all on the doors. Did the hood as well. I think you should have seen that in the time lapse. Um, gun was a little bit wonky when I did the hood and hardtop. There's an air pressure gauge on the gun that you can use to really dial her in, and then there's a pressure gauge on the compressor. I was using the one on the gun, but over time the needle shifted, so it was off by like 5 psi, which when you're working with like 10 to 12 psi at the tip, that's quite a bit. So it was reading high, so I was shooting low, which is why the clear coat on the hood and hardtop was a little bit more orange peel. I had to do a little bit more block sanding on it. It came out, I think, decently. Worst case, I may have to sand it and reshoot it. This ended up with a pretty nice, just a real light orange peel, which is kind of what the factory would have been. It's not a glass finish. It's got a little ripple. It's funny because your eye sees it differently than the camera, but you can kind of see it in the light reflection there. Otherwise, got the doors done, windshields done. Did get one little sag somewhere around in here, can't really see it. Otherwise, this door came out pretty good as well. Again, you can see, got a real nice finish out of the gun this time, now that I got the air dialed in. Like I say, it's half tempting to go back and reshoot the hood and the hardtop sides, but they came out pretty good, so I think we'll let them ride. It's one of those things you got to kind of pick and choose your battles. Otherwise, those are all good. I did have to reshoot the bib. I shot that one first. It had that orange peel, and when I did the wet sanding to get rid of the orange peel, I hit a couple high spots, went through the base. But that came out really nice. I'm not sure if you can really see it. Let me get down there. So the bib's done, which is most of the parts that were loose. I got to do the fenders in their own little batch and the running boards because they've got their, I got to figure out what I want to do with the base, the primer that they got on there. And then once I can get all these pieces tucked away in storage, I'll pull the tub off, and we'll do the same process for the tub on its own. We'll get it on the rotisserie jig there, get it off the frame, get it on the rotisserie, then we can rotate it, get the underside, get the top side, all that fun jazz. Same process for that fella, but it's going to be its own little series. But otherwise, pretty happy. Good, kind of can see the color. It's a nice little motivator. It's nice to see the color go on. So pretty happy there. Well, back in the old Tyvek suit, got the hinges all hung up. All the small parts basically, got the running boards. Ended up blasting those. Took the whatever primer they had on there, gonna put epoxy on there, just a little more durable. But yeah, if you look behind, quite a smattering of hinges and other small parts. Looks like a birthday party with streamers hung up. But anyway, gonna get some epoxy primer in the gun, gonna mix that up, give her the old 5-minute stir, and we're gonna give her a shoot, let her dry, give her a quick coat of base and clear. Can't put too thick on any of these parts, they're kind of moving items with fitment issues. So they're just gonna get epoxy, base and clear. But we'll get her mixed up, we'll get her shot, and we'll see her when she's done. Well, I had a chance to dry overnight, back at her, new day. Hinges came out pretty good. You can kind of see, it's hard to catch this stuff on camera. You can hide a lot on camera too, ironically. But hinges came out pretty good. No real complaints there. Definitely a pain to get all hung up. There's just a lot of hinges on this puppy. Vent panel came out pretty good as well. Got a nice shine on that. All these trim pieces there turned out good. Running boards came out real nice. Glad I took them all the way down. Just kind of a known surface that epoxy should hold up a little better. But pretty happy with those. That's one of those panels where if you get a run in it, you're going to have a hard time sanding it out. But they look pretty good. I did get a drip on this little guy. Should sand out. If not, those are easy enough to reshoot. But all these hinges came out pretty good. Gonna let them dry for quite a while before we throw the hardware on them. Just make sure that paint has a good time to cure. But otherwise, got a batch of all the little stuff done. There's just a lot of little stuff. It was kind of a lot more time consuming than I would have guessed. You think kind of it's just the hinges and stuff, but it's a lot of fiddly work. But one more piece to the puzzle. Get these peeled down, put them in with the rest of the body panels to cure, and we'll be onto the fenders next. Gotta strip those down, do a little bit of body work to them, and then we'll do the same epoxy primer and bring them all the way back up. So that's next in the docket. Well, getting ready to shoot one more batch, just a little guy. Ended up blasting the front fenders. They did have a black primer on it, but who knows what it was, so just took it off to get that nice kind of epoxy primer underneath it. Didn't take too long. Sandblasting is never a great time, but it's nice to have them nice and clean. We'll need to do a little bit of just real light body work on the corner, just to smooth that out. There's a little bit of a pressing kind of stuff there. Otherwise, this guy, same deal, came pretty clean. Did end up having to run the die grinder with a 2-inch sanding disc on it just to knock some of the sharp edges off of this. It'll just help give you a little better finish and help the paint hold up a little bit better under there. And then we're going to shoot the bezel. It needs to get epoxy and surfacer, so this batch is just going to be epoxy surfacer. That one's actually going to be white versus these get that Cygnus, but it at least get kind of let us batch up the epoxy primer and the surfacer, get these guys all ready to go, and then I think next up will be the tub. So once we got this, everything will be out of the garage. We'll be able to pluck that tub off, put it on the rotisserie over there, work on that. We'll do the flares at the same time. And then there are a few little odds and ends, like the trans tunnel hiding over in the corner. We'll probably catch those after the fact. No real hurry on those. It'd be nice to get everything kind of sorted together. That's trans tunnel is one of the last pieces to go in. But anywho, I got to whip up a bucket of epoxy primer. We'll get these shot, and we'll throw some surface around, and we'll do some body work on them. But it's chipping away, getting there. Slowly running out of parts to paint. Kind of like sandblasting. It seems like a never-ending list, but here we go. Well, Fender's got some surfacer on it. Other Fenders over there. Bib's behind me. Just doing a little bit of wet sanding to smooth them on out. You got to watch a little bit. These aren't the flattest panels. They've got things like spot welds and stuff that are pretty typical. But otherwise should come out pretty nice. Just going to give them a quick wet sand here with 400. Then we'll get them back up on the rack and shoot them with sealer, base, and clear and see what we got. But should turn out pretty good. These are those aftermarket fenders. I believe they come from Taiwan. They're not too bad. There's a little bit. Had to do a little bit of, one of them had a little bit of a wrinkle here from where they pressed it, so needed to smooth that out. And kind of as mentioned on one of the older videos, you do have to kind of wallow out the holes. They're not exactly where they need to be. They will get, that apron sits here. So you got a body panel that kind of runs right down that line, and then they get covered up with bolts and washers, so not a big deal to kind of oval out those holes as you need to. Should turn out all right, but we'll get these wet sanded, get the other one wet sanded, and hang them up, shoot a little bit more. Like I said before, it's kind of funny. You put on the material and take her back off, but it does give you a nice finish. There is just a lot of time in that body work, which is kind of where this video is going to be a little bit interesting. It's going to be probably a 2 or 3 week video. I think I started on the 14th. Today's the 2nd of July, so it's been a couple weeks just doing body work, paint and filler. But anyway, back to it. Got more wet sanding to do. Let them dry, probably get a little snack, shoot that sealer, shoot that base, and then hopefully these will dry in the afternoon. Got a nice warm day today. They should cure pretty quick, so onward. there's the kick panel, came out pretty good. Had to reshoot this one. I think the first time it got a little sag in it. Small part, so it doesn't really hurt to reshoot it, but as you can see, you got a nice finish on that guy. So he won't really need much. Bezel came out pretty good. There's a fairly decent view. Did the bezel in a bright white. It's actually the same color as the Wrangler I have. So it's a white versus the cream that the Cygnus is. You can kind of see the difference there. Just to give it a little two-tone contrast. Technically the bezel was Cygnus from the factory, so everything was the same color, but FJs typically have that two-tone. So running with that. Should give it kind of that classic look without going too far astray. Windshield washer cover came up pretty good. They're all going to get a quick hit with the buffer just to smooth them out. Otherwise, same deal. Fenders came out pretty good. You can see they got a nice shine on them. Again, just going to give them a quick hit with the buffer just to give them a nice clean shine. But otherwise, came out pretty good. Pretty happy there. Getting better at shooting this type of clear. Got it dialed in now that I fixed the gauge on the gun. The gun had a faulty pressure gauge, so when you'd go to set your pressures, it was just off. Now that we got her dialed in, just getting a little better results with the clear, so you don't need as much after work wet sanding and stuff like that. Otherwise, inner fender liner came out good. You will see those when you pop the hood. Less critical than the top. Same way, those inner fenders are visible because of the way they're structured, but they came out pretty good as well. Hopefully they'll have enough time to cure, harden up, so when you bolt them up, we don't do too much to the paint there. But all in all, pretty happy. Another batch down. That's batch 4. We'll get these pulled down, hit them with the buffer, and then we're going to drag that tub outside, hit it with the blaster just to touch up. There is a little bit of surface rust on that cowling where it's been sitting in the raw steel for a while, but I got the blaster, so we'll hit that with the blaster, get that cleaned up. Might blast any spots where they got a little bit of etch primer on there just to clean it up. Got to do a little bit of touch-up work. Got to re-weld the body mounts underneath. Got to finish welding that floor pan. Once I get it on the rotisserie, you can flip it over. But otherwise, she'll be back to a rolling frame, which is kind of neat, all the way back down to the bottom. And once that tub's painted and drying, we can start some assembly. So that'll be a nice milestone. Onward. Nice to have those all buttoned up. It's nice to see it in color. You can hear my shoes. They got a little bit of clear coat under them. But pretty happy with how everything out. It's nice to see the color. I don't remember it ever being white when I was a kid. We repainted it in '88. I was born in '83. I do remember us doing that, but in general, I don't remember it ever really nicely in that factory white. So it's kind of cool to see that color. It's an interesting color. It's kind of a tan, desert tan-ish white, but it's got a little bit of gray, a little bit of brown. It's an interesting little color depending on the light. All in all, though, pretty happy. Turned out pretty good once I got the gun figured out. Having an air pressure gauge that went wonky is a bit of a oops, but you catch it. I'm glad I caught it before I did the tub. It's kind of a nice thing about doing stuff in batches. You get to figure it out that way. Next episode we'll probably be working on the tub, get that buttoned up. But it's time to get out of this Tyvek suit. She is a smidge toasty, even though it's 72 in here. I am sweating bullets. But we'll see how this turns out. It's kind of a bunch of choppy footage, a little bit of time lapse. It is literally watching paint dry, so we'll see what we got, but it is kind of a fun milestone. But anyway, thanks for riding along. We'll catch you on the next one.